Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I would like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is kind of a special webinar for leadership teams. We're going to be talking about the various leadership team level tools and reports that are in the system. So regardless of what your particular role is, whether it's president or vice president or growth coordinator or secretary treasurer or even director consultants in some cases, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through all of the different functionality at a leadership team level. So I'm going to do my best to try not to say that it's the vice president's responsibility to do this, and it's the secretary treasurer's responsibility to do this, or the president's responsibility to do this. And the reason I'm going to avoid doing that is because it does vary slightly from region to region. I'll give just a quick example. Traditionally in BNI, it is the vice president's responsibility to enter the Poms report on a weekly basis. Now, that being said, I know of at least a few regions that I work with that they have a special position where they've delegated out the permission to enter Poms reports to a special helper in the chapter that is in charge of just that data entry. And they do this just because, traditionally, the vice president has quite a few responsibilities on their plate in managing the membership committee and everything else. So they've split out some of that and given access to do that to some other positions. So that being said, going to try to keep it rather generic. The other reason is that in BNI Connect, most of the time, the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, although they may not perform the various functions, they still mostly have access to all the functions. And even though a president may very rarely, if ever, go in and actually submit a Poms report, there's those times when, let's say, the vice president or that data entry person goes on vacation for a couple of weeks. It sure would be great if the president or maybe the secretary treasurer could jump in and just perform that activity for a week or two to keep things on track. So again, I'm going to be showing all of the different functions today, even though traditionally it may not be your role to take care of that. Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. First of all is that this is a live webinar, so if you have any questions whatsoever as we're going through the things today, just feel free to ask. The best way to do that is by putting in a question into the questions panel. I will see that pop up on the screen. I can answer that question as we're going through if it's related to what we're talking about. Or if it's something completely and totally unrelated, I can tackle that at the end of the session today. Now, normally these webinars are scheduled for about 30 minutes. This particular webinar, I know usually goes about 45 minutes. It's just because there's a lot of different things to cover, and because you guys are typically the leaders in your chapters, you tend to have more questions than some of the other materials that we cover. That being said, I do want to be respectful of people's time, and I will try to keep the content portion of it as tight as possible. That being said, for anybody that does have questions, this is what I do all day, every day, is I answer questions about BNI Connect. I am happy to keep this webinar live and active until every single question is answered. Couple of other things. This is being recorded. You'll be able to find our recordings in a couple of different places. The easiest place to find it is on our support site. Now, you can always access our support site by clicking on the question mark in BNI Connect. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner below where it says your name and everything, there's this question mark in a white circle. Clicking that will take you to the support site. On the support site, you'll see our list of upcoming webinars. Now, this series is repeated on a monthly basis. We've started creating the schedule for next month, so please do take a look at next month's schedule. But if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see chapter training and documentation. And there you'll see all of the recorded webinars. For example, I could click, they're all chronologically ordered. I can click on April, for example. And all of the webinars we've done so far in April have been recorded and uploaded. You can click through and watch them here, or go right to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. And if you'd like to be notified when new videos are uploaded, please subscribe to us up here. We have Of course, all of the webinars are uploaded there for safekeeping, but we also have other things like educational moments, short 3 to 5 minute videos just on very specific topics. So please do feel free to peruse our YouTube channel as well. But all right, let's get down to the topics of conversation today. And again, we're going to be talking about the leadership team tools and reports, so the different things that you can do that might enhance your chapter experience, or they may just be responsibilities that need to be done on a weekly basis. All right, so to get to the really the more administrative side of things, we do have to get beyond the home screen. Now, the home screen, of course, is where we go to look at our referral slips, for example, or all the things that we're doing as a member on a weekly basis. So we can submit our weekly slips, we can track our referrals, we can review the slips that we've entered. We have statistics right here on our homepage for our membership. One little tip and trick, by the way, for those of you, especially for you possibly vice presidents or data entry people out there, you will always get the comments from your members saying, oh, I submitted that referral and how come I don't see it? How come it isn't showing up, or things like that? The easiest way to troubleshoot that is to make sure that they understand that, first of all, these numbers up here do not change until after the weekly Poms report is submitted. So they go into a draft mode until that weekly meeting has taken place and that Poms report has been submitted. The easiest thing to tell them to do is to please check and review their slips. The moment that it's submitted, it will show up in their review my thank you for closed business or referral slips. If it is successfully in there, then it is ready to go. It will either say completed or draft, in which case they can determine whether or not that Poms report has been submitted. But if it's showing up here, it was successfully submitted. The other thing you can do is have them look at their personal participation report. And this is the best report for troubleshooting errors in the Poms reports. Have them print this out or have them export this and highlight which week has the error. This is especially helpful for members that say, oh yeah, I wasn't absent 3 times in the past 6 months or something like that. You can go through and directly look and say, no, you were absent on November 6th. You were absent on March 5th. Is that correct? And at that point, they can review it week by week instead of just looking at the total number. So much easier to troubleshoot individual errors that way. But as I said, if we want to get into the tools, though, we're going to have to go beyond the home screen. Now, most of the places that you're going to find things are going to be under network, operations, reports, and tools. A lot of people say, I can't remember where to go to find these things. Here's how I personally remember to which option I'm looking for. Network is always going to be the social media functions. That's the connections, the groups, the testimonials. So really the social network side of BNI and BNI Connect. So if I'm looking to, for example, find a plumber in Australia, that's the place I would go for that. Operations and reports are really where we're going to spend the majority of our time on leadership teams. Operations is going to be the input side of things, and reports is the output side of things. So reports, you'll never be able to input anything directly into reports. It's really just for getting information out of the system. Operations, on the other hand, is really the day-to-day operations or management of your chapter and your membership. Tools and admins have special functions, so most people aren't going to have access to those except for maybe the being able to edit your chapter website, which we cover in a completely different webinar. Before we move beyond the home screen, Kevin Lee does have a question. It says, how do you add revenue to my business? Well, revenue to my business is actually a special number that's tracked here in BNI Connect only. The revenue received to my business is really, again, it's nothing that we ever tracked before in BNI, and it's also something that is not tracked in the Poms report. The only way to track revenue received to my business is by submitting the thank you for closed business slips here in BNI Connect. the way it works is that the thank you for closed business, as you know, when I submit a slip, let's say that Kevin, you and I are in the same chapter, I submit a slip thanking you for generating business. That money gets attributed in the Poms report next to your profile for being the person that generated the business. Up until now, the other side of that transaction has never really been tracked. Only through BNI Connect can we submit these slips, record them in the Poms report, keep it anonymous, but for you and only for you, we keep track of all of the slips that you've submitted. Now, this particular report is only available for me to review. Nobody else can see this report, and we basically take a summary of that report for the last 12 months and for your lifetime since you started submitting slips, and we keep a running tally for you. But again, nobody else can see that number, just like nobody else can see the details of any of the slips that you've submitted. Does that help, Kevin? Does that explain it? And again, I've been a member since 2002, and I could only start tracking this number when this function came out a couple of years ago. So even my quote-unquote lifetime statistics are pretty low because it doesn't include the first 10 years or so of my membership. Okay? All right, so moving on. Again, we're gonna live most of our lives beyond the home screen here in operations and reports. Again, operations are going to be input related. Reports is output related. So let's take a look what's available for us under the operations menu. So we're going to go to operations chapter. And you'll see we're broken here into different things on the left-hand side. And within each of these are additional menu items on the right. So we're going to be looking really today, we're going to look at the visitors. We're going to look at meeting management, which has the Poms and the speakers. We're not really going to look at managing memberships today because a lot of regions don't necessarily do that at the chapter level. The goals we cover in a separate webinar, but please know that you can enter chapter goals as well. We'll take a quick look at the mentoring program, and we'll look at these email options. So while we're already down here, let's take a look at these different email options. There's 3 different options under Create Email, and this is probably one of the most useful tools that I've ever found as both a director consultant and as somebody on the leadership in my chapter. This first option here is Email My Chapter. So if you click on Email My Chapter, before BNI Connect, I always had a major problem trying to get in touch with my chapter because there's kind of no easy way to get a list of their email addresses. You'd always go and pretty much hit reply all to the last message that you'd find in your inbox, but it never went to the right people. By clicking on Email My Chapter, I have the most current list of all of the active members of my chapter. I can take this, I can copy it. I then use my own email program, and I always recommend putting those in the BCC line, and that will allow you to send out an email and know it's going to all the right people in your chapter. We do have a question here from Pam. Pam says, so do I understand correctly that the review reports on the home screen are only populated by submitting these numbers online? The only number that is tied directly and only to the slips is the revenue received to my business. All of the other numbers on that are derived from the Poms report. So regardless of whether you're using paper slips or online slips, those populate the Poms and they're read from the Poms. Again, everything except that revenue received to my business. So Pam, if yours are all blank, then why don't we troubleshoot that offline? I'd be happy to stay on with you after the main portion of the webinar, or we can start a separate support ticket with that. I'd be happy to help you with that. Sound good? Excellent. All right, so that was the Email My Chapter. The next thing is the emailing a visitor invitation. This is just a great little tool for sending out an email invitation to somebody if they would like to visit your chapter. Very easy to do. You just fill out somebody's name, So John Smith, for example, from Smith Co. Enter their email address. I'm going to enter my own email address here because I want the message to go to myself. And then a quick personal message. Great seeing you the other day. I would love to introduce you to my networking team. Send. This is going to take this and encapsulate it into a back-end template here in BNI Connect. Send that email out immediately to this potential visitor. And it just arrived in my inbox, and this is what it looks like. You can see it's a very professional invitation. It has a nice graphic involved with it. It customizes it with Dear John and puts my message as the first paragraph. And the great thing about it is that it fills all this information in based on the information from your chapter. So it puts in the name of your chapter, where you meet, when you meet, what day you meet, lets them know that they're looking for somebody in that profession. It briefly explains what BNI is, and then it lets them know to RSVP with you. Now, you can use this invitation anytime you'd like to, and it will be customized to your chapter. Now, let's start talking about visitor hosts a little bit, visitor hosts and maybe secretary treasurers in some regions as well. And the next step is going to be, we do need to record our visitors in BNI Connect, and building a visitor database is very important because it starts to, it enters the statistics into the Poms report for who invited the visitor, but it also starts building a visitor database, which makes it much easier to go back and follow up with visitors later, or re-invite them to the next Visitors Day, or just find out that John Smith has visited 6 times in the past 6 months. All of this can only be done if you start keeping track of those visitors. Now, there's 2 different processes for registering and recording visitors. If you start this process before the meeting, you can actually register visitors for upcoming meetings. This actually helps to remind those potential visitors to actually show up to the meetings. I'm sure you've never had the opportunity where somebody says, yeah, I'll be there on Thursday, and then they never show up. Well, usually that's because either they forgot, or it's because they didn't really think anybody was expecting them to be there. So pre-registering a visitor is a great practice for that. And we do that by clicking on Register a Prospective Visitor under the Manage Visitors. All we need to do is fill out the form. A lot of this on BNI Connect is just filling out the form. So I'm going to make sure I select their profession. Let's say John Smith. He's in recreation and he sells RVs. He said he would visit next week on the 29th. And this is John Smith from Smith Co. I can put in as many details as I would like to, especially for something like a Visitors Day. When you have the members do this themselves, it saves the visitor host and the secretary treasurer and anybody else involved in the visitor process a whole lot of time later because they don't have to type in all the chicken scratch off of the sign-in sheet. But the more information you can put in, the better. The phone number and the email address are mandatory. And I'm going to go ahead and click Submit. And again, what's great about this process is when you pre-register a visitor, it's going to send them a confirmation. So it's no longer just a verbal, hey, you going to come to the meeting next week? It's now a, you are registered to come to this meeting, so you better show up type of situation. So here's the email I just received. You are confirmed to visit the BNI Burr chapter on the 29th at 5:30, and please plan to be there for 90 minutes. So this has stepped up the invitation game just a little bit. Now, again, that's still before the meeting. The next thing that happens is that the meeting happens and the visitor actually shows up, or maybe they don't. So the next step in this process for usually the visitor hosts or secretary treasurers is going to be that they need to mark attendance for the meeting. So they either need to input all the visitors that came to the meeting that didn't pre-register, and or make sure that the people that were registered for the meeting, we mark them as having showed up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Manage the Registered Visitors and take a look and see which visitors were registered and which ones showed up. And I can see John Smith here has registered many, many times to visit the chapter. If I want to, I can sort this by date as well. And our meeting was yesterday, and Peter Plummer here. Peter Plummer actually showed up to the meeting yesterday, so I need to go in and I need to mark him as having visited the chapter. All I need to do as a visitor host, if they were pre-registered, and hopefully the member did this themselves, I would just need to go in and mark them as attended. I can then choose whether or not to add the visitor to the Poms report. Double check all the data entry. I can also double check to make sure the right person, whoever is selected in the invited by, will end up with the credit in the Poms report. Make sure I have the visit date and everything else intact. And I can choose whether or not to send this person a follow-up email thanking them for visiting. When I'm sure this is all set, I click Submit. Now this will be put into the queue for the Poms report, and the vice president or whoever is entering the Poms will be asked to make a decision whether or not to accept that into the Poms. And what you'll notice is that our good friend Peter Plummer here is no longer listed in our pending visitors since they have now shown up to the meeting. And I was also sent, Peter Plummer here was sent a thank you for visiting email. Now, if the person didn't pre-register, it's still a great idea to track these visitors that are coming to your chapter. And you do that by clicking on Add Visitor. The form is nearly identical. The only difference between this form and the other form is that you're immediately chosen whether or not to add the visitor to the Poms report. But again, you're just going to choose what date did they visit. You'll notice it is allowing for past dates as well, so you can do backdated data entry. And again, fill out the form and choose whether or not to send them a follow-up email. You can also access that, again, under the Operations menu, under the Manage Visitors. You can also click on Record a Visitor Post-Meeting. In addition to that, you're now building a visitor database, which you can access by clicking on Manage Visitors, and there's also some visitor reports for us as well. So that's largely the visitor process. Any questions on the visitors? Otherwise, we're going to move on to the meeting management side of things. All right, so under meeting management, we do have a couple of options. Traditionally, these are going to be for the data entry person or the VP as well. And also the secretary treasurer is usually responsible for the speaker rotation. Now, why would you keep your speaker rotation in BNI Connect? One of the reasons for it is that it does also trigger an email reminder, as well as lists your speakers on your regional website. So, for example, if I go to my chapter website, which is bniri.com/Wakefield, you can see that we have our next month's worth of speakers, and we have 2 speakers each week, but they're all listed up on the website. So this is just one more kind of point of presence, especially for Google SEO purposes. My name is appearing now out on the internet in a new place. The other reason is that each of these speakers, so next week our 2 speakers are Jan Birtwell and George Sauerwine. So 6 days before and 3 days before the meeting, they will get reminders saying, hey, by the way, you are the next presenter. Please remember to show up early, be prepared for your presentation, and bring a door prize. Assigning a speaker is pretty straightforward. All you need to do is, under Meeting Management, click on View Edit Speakers. I just need to choose a starting date that I'd like to view the speakers from. I can then click View Speakers and see the list of speakers. From here, if I need to add a new speaker to the list or if I need to remove a speaker, let's say that Ricky Martin, he had called and he canceled speaking for next week. So I can go ahead and remove Ricky Martin from the speaker list. And then if I need to, I can add somebody back in by clicking Assign Speaker. So let's put somebody new in for April 29th next week. And let's see, Marky Mark has gladly stepped in to take over for Ricky Martin. And now we have a new speaker assigned. You can also go out as far as you want to, technically, in entering the speaker rotation. I really don't recommend going much further than 6 to 8 weeks out. In order to change the speaker rotation, you do have to delete people and put a new person in. Unfortunately, I can't drag and drop and change the order. So maintaining the speaker rotation as people leave or come into the chapter or need to reschedule, I would keep the list to maybe 6 or 8 weeks maximum. But the other nice thing about this is it will keep a historical record as well to see who has spoken during the various time periods. All right, let's go back to the operations chapter. Let's take a quick look at the Poms report. How do you enter the Poms report? Hold on a second. Pam asked a question. Is there a way to put an outside speaker on the list? The answer to that is no. You will notice, however, that on the speaker list, there may be some names that you don't necessarily recognize. The names on this list will include your national directors, your executive directors, and the director consultants from your regional team. For example, I'm listed as a director consultant up in Antarctica. So again, for outside people outside your chapter, your director team, your regional director team, and your national director team will be available for drop-down. Unfortunately, speakers outside of your chapter roster and or your regional team are not permitted by policy. But if you do have a question about that, you can check in with your executive director. Does that help, Pam? Excellent. All right, so going back to the Poms report, let's take a look at the process of entering a Poms report for, again, usually the vice president, data entry person. The way to do that is, again, we're going to go to meeting management. Now, if I want to review any of the previously submitted Poms reports, I could click on View Poms Summary. That would allow me to view individual Poms reports. Or if I want to enter a new one, I can always click on Enter Poms. I'm going to go ahead and click on Enter Poms. Now, you'll notice before I even get to the Poms reports, it's asking me to please make a decision on the various visitors that have been entered. So, for example, I, as a visitor host a minute ago, put in that Peter Plummer showed up to the meeting. So what it's asking me is, it says Peter Plummer was invited by Art Garfunkel. Jeremy Walsh did the data entry on that. And they visited on the 22nd. Do you want that credit to be given to Art Garfunkel in the 422, the April 22nd report? And I can say either yes or no. So I can say, oh, you know what, that's the 5th time John Smith has visited. Can't give credit again. I could say no to that. For Peter Plummer, sounds like a good deal. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And then finally, we have myself visited. Now, if there's already a Poms report in place, it will give you a link to go back and review that Poms report. So I could click, for example, this word draft, and I can see if the person was already given credit in the Poms report, if there's anything else I need to know from there. For example, because this report is going back to January, the vice president or whoever was doing the Poms reports back then could have already just manually given me a visitor credit without entering it into the visitor database. So I could take a look at this and see if that's the case. And if not, I can go back and choose yes or no. Once I've cleared out my decisions on the visitors, I can then choose what date I would like to enter my Poms report for. And I will basically be given the Poms spreadsheet. Now you'll notice here that the visitor entry, the visitor credit for Art Garfunkel, who invited Peter Plummer there, has been already entered. And the other thing you'll notice, although my chapter up in Antarctica is slacking a bit, what you'll notice is that all of the online slips will have already been entered as well. So normally when you go in here, this report will be mostly filled out for you if your chapter is participating in the online slips program. Now, if you want to check which ones have been entered automatically, you can always go to the slips audit report. And this will give you a list, and right now the only one that was automatically entered here was the visitor credit to Art Garfunkel for the Peter Plummer visitor. But all of the referrals and the thank you for closed business and the one-to-ones, those would all appear in this list for all of the slips that were entered electronically during the week. The rest of this is just a matter of filling out the spreadsheet. So for example, Albert Camus had an inside referral to Jacob Goodwin, so that would be a referral given for Albert and a referral received for Jacob. And let's say that Amy did a one-to-one with Adam Sandler, so I would put that in there. Somebody submitted a $2,000 thank you for closed business to Rebecca Goodwin. And you do have to scroll over to get to the CEUs. Once you've filled this out, you can make any remarks as necessary, and then you can choose one of these options. Submit is just going to finalize this report and submit it and close it out. Once it's submitted, all the statistics will be official. They'll be included in all of the reports, so the summary Poms and things like that. Mark as holiday. What Mark as holiday does is it actually closes out the report as if the meeting didn't happen. It is necessary if you do, quote-unquote, go dark for a week, meaning that you don't have a meeting, which might happen around the holidays, especially around Christmas and New Year's and things like that. If you don't meet, you still need to go in and mark it as a holiday. What that does is it removes this week's meeting out of the statistics. So it won't count towards things like traffic lights. That's pretty important to do because it will also take all of the online slips for this meeting and push them to next week's meeting, or I should say the next open meeting. So if you go back and mark a holiday, 2 months later, it's actually going to push it to the next open meeting. So you want to make sure you do this immediately if you know your chapter is not meeting for a week. You can choose Save as Draft if you need to come back to this later, or you can discard this Poms and just bring it back to default and start all over again. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this. Am I sure that I want to submit it? It'll then allow me to review it. And I'm all set at this point. Now, as I mentioned, you can also review Poms reports by going to Meeting Management and View. So let's say that there is an error in a Poms report and you do need to go back and correct it. Let's say that a member had told me that there was an error back in February. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to view reports from February 4th. And it looks like this report from the 25th is the one that actually had an error in it. So I click on the word completed. I can now see this report. In order to make changes to it, though, I need to unlock the Poms report. Now, this unlock report may or may not be accessible. It is a special permission that is given on a regional basis. So if you don't see the unlock button, then you would have to ask your regional office to unlock the report. If you do see it, click the unlock button. It will then turn it back into an editable spreadsheet. You can make whatever changes are necessary and then resubmit the report. And that, my friends, is the Poms report. Any quick questions on the Poms report? All right, the last thing to show you under the operations menu anyway is going to be the mentoring program. Now, the mentoring program is pretty straightforward. What it does is it allows you to assign a mentor and a mentee in order to really teach a new member usually about BNI and to get them jump-started in the right direction. This is all about making sure that when your new members come into the chapter, they feel welcome. They also feel like they're part of the group immediately. Now, it's very, very important that, of course, they take the member success program right away, but it's also important to get them to get started off with the networking. And what better way to do that than to pair them up with somebody that can mentor them and have a weekly one-to-one with them to discuss good habits in BNI. The way to assign mentors is pretty straightforward. We go to mentoring program and we're going to assign a mentor and mentee. The mentor and mentee program starts an 8-week email campaign. So every week they're going to get an email saying, okay, this is week 1. You should be talking about, let's say, 60 seconds and making sure that you're asking for a specific referral. Week 2 might be make sure that you've attended your member success program. So you go through this 8-week program with the mentor and the mentee. Now, this date that you're choosing will start when they get the emails. So I don't know if it's a good idea for them to get emails on Friday because they might forget about it. So I'd like the emails to start this coming Monday. I just choose the mentor. So Jamie Jones is going to be mentoring Joe Slow. They both get the same copy of the email. So if I click Submit, this will start those two members on the mentoring campaign, and starting on Monday, they will get those emails on a daily basis. If I need to remove somebody from the mentoring, I can always click on View Mentor Mentees. I choose a start date and an end date. And I can reassign mentors, or I can delete mentor pairs out of the system as well. Gail asks a question. She says, if chapters go dark due to weather, is that marked as holiday? Yes, anytime you don't have a meeting for whatever reason, that would be considered a quote-unquote holiday. So anytime the chapter doesn't meet. So we probably should change that button to simply say, chapter did not meet this week. But that's too long to fit on a button. All right, so that is really the things that I wanted to show you today under the operations menu. Any questions on that before we move on to some reports? And I know we're already about 9 minutes past the bottom of the hour. So I want to try to keep it as tight as we can for people that might be on a tight time frame today. All right, so let's take a look at some of these reports. And again, I am not going to go through every single report here. I just want to show you about a half a dozen of my favorite reports in the system from a leadership team perspective. The rest of the reports, please feel free to just go and start clicking through them because you can't really break anything when it comes to reports. Some of the more helpful reports right away. The very first one here, the member training report, pretty straightforward report, just shows you people's training history. Why is this a good one? especially for you secretary treasurers and membership committee people and vice presidents. The really cool thing about this report is the show never attended. So for example, when you're setting up your speaker rotation, in order for somebody to be on the speaker rotation, they will have had to have gone to Member Success Program in the last, well, hopefully they do that in the first 60 days of their membership. So to find out if somebody's now eligible, if they've gone to their Member Success Program, I could click on Show Never Attended, and it ignores the date fields at that point, and choose Member Success Program. So now I can go and figure out which members of my chapter have not attended the Member Success Program. Oh, and man, they're really doing horrible up here in up in Antarctica in the BNI Burr chapter. So I've really got to get on these people to get their Member Success Program members who have never attended a Member Success. So I find that to be really helpful when scheduling the speaker rotation. The chapter roster report, a fairly straightforward report, but from a leadership team perspective, what you need to do is to make sure that your A, people are showing up on the roster, but B, this also shows you all of the people that are assigned to the various positions. So if you have, let's say, a mentor coordinator, you think that this mentor program is a great idea and you want to start assigning mentors in your region, take a look at the mentor program. Take a look at the mentor coordinator. If they say, hey, you know, I've been trying to assign the mentors, but I can't do it, are they listed in your chapter as the mentor coordinator? And if not, give your director consultant or give your regional office, your executive director a call, and they will be able to assist with making sure that the correct people are assigned because the permissions are attached to the various positions. Membership dues report, again, is pretty straightforward from a leadership team perspective. This is a great tool for finding out who is due in your chapter. It is important to not just look at the people. I mean, obviously, these people that are highlighted, because they're due on June 1st, you should be already in the process of renewing them, making sure that you're doing the reviews and the membership committee meetings to discuss whether or not they will be approved for renewal. But it's also important to look further out on this list. The key and most critical time to be looking at is about 6 or 7 months out. The reason for that is 6 or 7 months out. So, you know, in this case, we want to be looking at people that are renewing towards the end of the year, October and November and December. So I want to be looking at, for example, Tia Hind and Jamie Jones, because they're renewing towards the end of this year. That gives us enough time, and Adam Sandler as well, who's renewing in September. That gives us enough time to really coach those members. And also, especially for first-year members, the biggest, I guess, hurdle is that 6-month period. So we really need to make sure that we're helping those members the most in reviewing them and just, quite frankly, making sure everything's okay. Of course, this report will also show you new members, late members, and members that have expired or dropped in the past few months. Going through some of these other ones, there are some very, very useful reports in here, but I'd like to skip down a little bit, and a couple that are at the bottom of the list that you may not scroll all the way down to normally. Take a look when you can at the chapter visitor report. Again, if you're keeping this visitor database, this is how you could follow up. Let's say that you had a visitor, you're having a visitor's day and during this member extravaganza period, and you want to make sure that you re-invite all of your visitors that have come over the past couple of months, let's say since January, for another look at the chapter. Why not bring them back in for a second visit during this member extravaganza period? This also, all reports in BNI Connect can be exported. The export of this report does have more information. So this exporting this will include, for example, their full address so that you can send out a physical letter or add them to something like a send out cards. Another report is the visitor registration report, and this one has some hidden meanings as well. If you are having a visitor's day in the next couple of months, it would be a great idea to pre-register your visitors like we showed you before, because one of the things that it does besides sending them the email is that it puts them into this registration report. So I can look at my visitor registration report and see my pipeline. You can run this for any date range, so even if your visitor's day is 2, 3, 4 weeks out and you're registering people for that day, you can see who is participating by who is registering them. So the invited by field really helps you to have some accountability with your chapter as to who is participating in this visitor's day. And of course, you can continue to follow up with the registered visitors that are scheduled to come to your meeting. All right, so we're at about 46 minutes past the hour. There's probably another 3 or 4 reports that I think are really great reports that I'd love to show you, but I do also want to make sure that I'm respectful of everybody's time. Would you guys like me to show you a couple more reports, or would you like to open this up to questions? All right, let's see. We have a couple of questions that are popping in. Let's see. Gail says, can event coordinators, I'm not sure what you mean by ME, Gail. Can event coordinators enter visitors? Gail, that is going to very much depend on your particular permissions in your region. I would say that normally, from an entering visitors perspective, oh, I'm sorry, member extravaganza. The most regions have it set that anybody can register a prospective visitor. So anybody can register a prospective visitor. Usually only the visitor hosts and the direct leadership team can record a post-meeting visitor, manage visitors, and manage the registered visitors. So again, in almost all cases, you need to be a visitor host or a leadership team to do anything except register a prospective visitor. Does that make sense, Gail? But again, you can change that in the system as an executive director. All right, so I see a couple of requests for a couple more reports. All right, let me show you a couple more of my favorite reports. And again, these are chapter level reports. All right, so we're talking about visitors days because it's member extravaganza season. A couple of things that I really, really love. Classifications not in chapter report. This is one of my favorite reports. And I'm just actually going to switch this over to my own chapter because it will give us some more pertinent data here. All right, so classifications not in chapter. What this one does, and it seems like it's a really, really kind of silly report, because all it has in here is classifications my chapter doesn't have and number of chapters that have this classification. This is actually really, really useful information, especially from a leadership team perspective. Anybody that's run a visitor's day before knows that it's always kind of a struggle with the chapter that says, oh, I've already invited everybody I could possibly think of, or I don't know who to invite. This report is great for that. First of all, it shows all, how many are there, Steve? 700 and something different categories. So if you're just really blanked out on ideas for who to invite, just go and look at this list. I mean, we have things, we have awnings and administrative services and art restoration, television advertising, chemical manufacturing. All these are professions that either currently exist in BNI or at one time existed in BNI. So it may spark people's memories as to, hey, you know what? I actually know somebody that does Bowen therapy. Maybe they would be interested. The other thing it does is it ranks them. So for example, this is my chapter. My chapter does not have a business attorney. That's actually true. We don't have a business attorney. But there are 7 other chapters. So there's 20 chapters in Rhode Island. 7 of those chapters have a business attorney. That tells me that it's a pretty popular category here in Rhode Island. It also tells me that I'm not competing against those chapters for the same business attorneys. So, in other words, a business attorney can come to my chapter, visit, really like BNI, but may have a hard time getting in another chapter because that category is already taken, which increases the likelihood that they'll come and join my personal chapter. So that's a good way to kind of figure out who to invite. You do need to be a little bit careful because of the way the categories are in BNI Connect. Just to give you an example, we do have a mortgage person in our chapter, but they're listed as residential mortgage. So there may be some quote-unquote false positives when you look at this, but it really has to do with the way the categories are listed. One of my other favorites in here is the meeting notes report. Another seemingly simple report, but how many of your chapters, how many of you guys out there pass around a sheet of paper for people to take notes during the meeting? This is one of the most effective ways to increase the number of referrals that your chapter gives. Again, increase the number of referrals that your chapter gives. The reason for that is this report is designed to literally just take notes during the meeting. Very simple report, just has the person's name, the company name, and a blank area. This one is designed to be printed. So you can print this out, leave it on the tables, pass it around, and it gives people a line to say, okay, well, when Christy Armstrong gave her weekly presentation, she asked to be introduced to John Smith from Acme Insurance, or she talked about avoiding the IRS, or whatever it might be that she mentioned. Just the fact that I'm writing this down will help to embed it in my memory so that as I'm around, out and about and meeting with clients and having one-to-ones during the week, it will help me remember that. So even if I end up leaving this piece of paper on the table or leaving it on the front seat of my car and never looking at it again, the act of writing it will help me to be a better referral giver. So we have a lot of chapters that will print this out for their members. Now, if you don't like the way it looks, fine. Export this to Excel. Open it up in Excel. And from here, you now have full control to do whatever you want with it. Just a little Excel tip. One of my favorite buttons in Excel is this button right here that says Format as Table. Pick a color scheme real quick. So I'm going to, today's kind of a green kind of a day. And now this allows me to do some fun stuff, like I'm going to go ahead and increase this notes column. And I actually want to change the height. So now I have more room for taking notes. I could even take notes electronically now if I wanted to. I can sort it by company name or by first name if I wanted to now. So much easier to work with, and it'll print exactly the way I want it to. Another report that I love, by the way, you can run a personal Poms report for anybody in your chapter. This is the exact same report that appears on your home screen, except that you can choose which member to run this for, and you can also go back any period of time. So let's say that I was coming up for renewal in my chapter, and my membership committee needed to review my membership. They could come to this personal Poms report, and they can go back, again, they can go back as far in time as they want to, and it will give a week-by-week breakdown of my participation. So, and again, it goes back much further than just the 1 year that's on the one that's on the home screen. Let's see, Gail says, where's the print button for the meeting notes on Excel? So let me just open that back up. And let's see, here's the meeting notes report here. To print it, once you have it in Excel, you do have to go to, for example, File, Print. And that'll allow you to print it out from Excel. So once you have it out of BNI Connect, you're now using it in that other piece of software. All right. Again, more from a leadership team perspective, the other report that I think is pretty cool is this Poms attendance report. Now, what this report does is it's going to give you a visual view of your chapter's attendance. And the reason I like this report is because it shows you some trends. So, for example here, if you look through here and look at one person here, I can see that this person is trending. They had a bunch of lates in a row, then an absent, and then all of a sudden they started sending substitutes and had a period of time where they were on medical leave. This might be something for me to consider as a membership committee person in order to maybe reach out to this person. Are you okay? Maybe reaching out to them when we see 2, 3, 4 lates in a row, or maybe 2 or 3 substitutes in a row, might help them to retain the member, or even just make them feel better if they're having a rough time. All right, so those are some of my favorites. Again, most of the rest of them you're hopefully already familiar with: the summary Poms report, the VP report, sponsor reports, the traffic lights reports. I mean, there's a ton of information to be had just by going into the system, getting beyond that home screen a little bit, getting a little bit more comfortable with some of the deeper functions, and you can get some of that information out. All right, we are at the top of the hour. I know more people are going to have to leave. Are there any additional questions? And again, I am happy to hang out for 2 hours if you guys want to. This is one of my favorite things to do. All right. While you're thinking of any additional questions, just a reminder, this is being recorded. It will be made available as soon as possible on the support site. You get there by clicking on the question mark in BNI Connect. That will take you to support.bniconnect.com. A good referral for me. Please, if you found some good information today, if you liked this format, please let the other members in your region and your chapters know about these webinars. We're posting our list of May 2015. Just about done with that schedule for next month. You can find those all up on the support site. You'll also find them soon in your regional calendar. Our very next webinar is going to be on a very similar one to this today on May 6th. And then we will be starting the member series over again with completing your profile on Friday, May 8th. So a good referral for me is all of the new members, the people that are coming into your chapters. Let's get them started off on the right foot with BNI Connect on May 8th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. You'll also find all the recordings up on youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. And of course, I would love it if you gave us a like. Facebook.com/BNI Connect Global. We do webinar reminders and tips and tricks and all sorts of things there as well. So please do give us a like up on Facebook. All right, questions. Do we have any additional questions? All right, on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And Pam, if you'd like to hang out for a couple of minutes, I would be happy to see if we can figure out your particular issue. All right. Anybody that wants to hang out and troubleshoot, you're welcome to play along. For everybody else, Have an absolutely wonderful rest of the week and weekend, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Happy connecting.